But we talk in storytelling a lot of times, and I think this is probably something that is good for your club. We talk about the storytelling process as being a triangle. It has three important parts. One important part is the story. Of course, you have to have a story. And then another important part is the storyteller, someone who can tell the story. But the third important part is a listener. Because if you can have a story and someone to tell the story, but if there's no one listening, you might as well just be talking to the trees. So being a listener, being a good listener, an attentive listener is very, very important with storytelling. It's sometimes difficult to arrange your life so that everything is simple, right?
Yes,
But I'm glad that you're here. And so this is good. You can talk, but one of the things that you asked me to talk about is listening. So you will be able to listen even if you are at work and not on screen and I don't know your name, you can still listen. And I have a funny little story to tell you about that. I have a friend who is a storyteller and she practices her stories out loud, which I think is really good. That's a very important thing to do. But she practices when she goes walking in her neighborhood. She walks through the park and she will practice her stories. She has a daughter who is usually at school when she does that. But one day her daughter was not in school. And so her daughter came with her walking through the park and the storyteller was practicing her stories. And they saw a woman who obviously had some problems. She was dressed very shabbily. She maybe had some drug problems or some mental problems, some problems. And so she was just wandering. This woman was wandering around the park, talking to the trees. And my friend, the storyteller's daughter, said, "Oh, look, Mommy, it's another storyteller." Because she thought, you talk to the trees, Mommy. And so this crazy person, she talks to the trees too. She must be a storyteller. So I thought that was funny. But we talk in storytelling a lot of times, and I think this is probably something that is good for your club. We talk about the storytelling process as being a triangle. It has three important parts. One important part is the story. Of course, you have to have a story. And then another important part is the storyteller, someone who can tell the story. But the third important part is a listener. Because if you can have a story and someone to tell the story, but if there's no one listening, you might as well just be talking to the trees. So being a listener, being a good listener, an attentive listener is very, very important with storytelling. So a story that I would like to tell you that comes from, I live in San California. And if you know where that is the very, very southmost part of the United States. And it is almost to Mexico. Mexico is about an hour drive from where I live. So this story comes from the south part of the United States, almost to Mexico, and it has a couple of words in Spanish too. There was a man who had lost his mule, like a donkey, and he was out looking for the mule. He was walking through the desert and it was hot and he was tired. He came to a cave in a cliff and he thought, I will go inside and it will be cool and I can rest. But he went inside the cave and he saw something amazing. The whole ground of the cave was covered with jewels, diamonds and rubies and pearls and emeralds. And he was very excited. So he began to scoop up the jewels and he put them in his pockets. And then he took off his hat and he put the jewels in his hat. And there were still many, many more jewels in the cave. But he thought, well, I'll take what I can. This is all I can carry. And he went to go out of the cave and he heard a voice. And the ground began to shake like an earthquake, and some of the rocks began to fall from the ceiling. And the voice said this in Spanish, todo o nada. That's the Spanish. In English, it means all or nothing. All or nothing. And the man looked around and he said, I will take all. I will take all of the treasure. I can't take it all now, but I will come back for the rest. He went to go out of the cave, and the ground began to shake again, and he heard the voice, todo o nada, all or nothing. And he said, oh, okay. I'll take nothing then. So he emptied out his pockets. He took the jewels out of his pockets and put them on the ground, and he emptied out his hat, and he left 2 small jewels in his pocket. He thought, they will not notice this. And he went to exit the cave, and the ground began to shake, and the voice came, todo o nada. He thought, ah. So he took out the 2 small jewels and dropped them on the ground, and then he went out of the cave. But he wanted all the treasure, and so the next day he took a cart, like a wheelbarrow, and he went to go back to the cave to get all of the treasure, all of it. But he went to the cliff, he didn't see a cave. He thought, oh, maybe it's around this way. He went around that way, no cave. He thought, oh, maybe it's the other way. He went the other way, no cave. And that man spent the rest of his life looking for that cave so that he could take all of the treasure. But when he was very old and he had still not found that cave and the treasure, he finally told other people about it. And they say that even today, if you go to that part of the desert, you will see many, many people with trucks and with carts and with ATVs, all looking for the cave with the treasure. And they are prepared to take all of the treasure. But no one has found it yet. So I guess if you come to America, you could look for that treasure too. So that is a legend that comes from New Mexico, the state of New Mexico. I would like to know what you think of that story and two things, what you think the point of the story is. What's the message? Because every story has to have a point, right? And also, I would like to know if you would think about telling that story and why you would tell it, what you would tell it for. We know that you can tell stories to family. You can tell stories in business meetings. You can tell stories in school meetings. You can tell stories in religious gatherings. You can tell stories in clubs like this. Could you tell the story? What do you think? What does it mean to you? What do you think the message of the story is? We always say in storytelling that something has to change in a story. You start out, in fact, sometimes people say, well, here's the pattern of a story. Somebody wanted something, but then there were problems. So they had to overcome the problems, and then they reach a climax and things resolve themselves. And you say, and after that, So in this story, it was, and the man never found the treasure. And after that, a lot of people looked for the treasure, but so far, they haven't found it either. So that's the end of the story. I think it's a story about treasure, right? Things that are valuable. Do you wish that you could find a cave with lots of jewels in it? Oh, yes. That would be great, right? You would be so happy. Would you take it all? You take a little bit? Would you spend the rest of your life looking for that cave again? I think there are a lot of people who spend their whole lives looking for treasure, that one thing that will make them rich and give them everything they want. So if Ruby says she's happy with her life now, that's great. Lucky you. Lucky you. How about the rest of you? I think it's a silly thing to spend the rest of your life looking for treasure that you may never find. It's good to plan, but I don't think this person was I don't think that he made a really smart choice. This was not a good choice. He could have probably done a lot better by doing something more productive, right? Learning some new skills, getting another job, going to school, something that would make him happier than that. So I think, so that's the reason that I like that story. I think it shows you that people are always spending their lives looking and looking and looking for the one thing that will make them happy, and maybe never finding it. Interesting. Yeah.